My name is Garrett Schmidt, and I've put together this video to further your knowledge on special education. This video includes the basic steps of special education and also talks about the history of special education. I hope you enjoy. Thank you. Now, the first step in the 10 basic steps of special education is that the child is identified as possibly needing special education and other related services. Now, this is done by either Child Find, which is an operating system that works differently in each state, or by referral of the child's teacher or other school personnel. Now, how this works is that a school professional may ask that a child be evaluated to see if he or she has a disability. The parents may also contact the child's teacher or other school professionals to ask that their child is evaluated. This request may be verbal, but it's best to put it in writing. The second step to special education is the child actually being evaluated. Now, this is said to be full and individual, which basically means that just the child is alone, is the only one being assessed in the areas that they may have the disability in. Now, if the parent does not agree with the evaluation outcome, then they can call on to another outside company, and they may require that the school pays for this. Now, the third step is that the eligibility is decided. This is where the group of individuals, like the parents and the teachers and the whole IEP team, get together and they look at the evaluation results. Together, then, they decide that if the child is a child with a disability, as defined by the IDEA. If the parents don't agree with this, then they may ask for a hearing to challenge the entire decision. Step 4 is that the child is found eligible for services. If the child is found to be a child with a disability, as defined by IDEA, then he or she is eligible for special education and related services. Within 30 calendar days after a child is determined eligible, a team of school professionals and the parents must meet to write an individualized education program, otherwise known as an IEP, for the child. The fifth step is that the IEP meeting is scheduled. The school system schedules and conducts the IEP meeting, and the school staff must let the parents know when, where, and why this meeting is happening, and then tell the parents what is all going on during the meeting, who will all be attending, and then let the parents know that they may invite whoever they believe would be willing to come to this meeting. Step 6 is that the IEP is written and that the placement of the child is all decided by the parents and the whole IEP team. The parents must know well in advance when the child will be going into special education and where the child will be going into special education. Step 7 is after the IEP is written, and then this includes the services being provided. Now, the school makes sure that the child's IEP is carried out exactly how it is written down. The parents are also given a copy of the IEP, and each of the child's teachers and service providers have access to the IEP and knows his or her specific responsibilities for carrying out the IEP. Now, the IEP includes the accommodations, modifications, and supports that must be provided to the child in keeping with the IEP. Step 8 is that progress is measured and reported to the parents. Now, in every IEP, there are progress goals that are clearly written out for the child, and now the child's progress towards those annual goals is measured during this step. His or her parents are regularly informed of the child's progress and whether that progress is enough for the child to achieve the goals by the end of the year. These progress reports must be given to the parents at least as often as parents are informed of their non-disabled children's progress. Step 9 is that the IEP is reviewed. A child's IEP is reviewed by the IEP team at least once a year, or more often if the parents or school ask for a review. If necessary, the IEP is revised. Parents, as team members, must be invited to participate in these meetings as well. Parents can make suggestions for changes, can agree or disagree with the IEP completely, or agree and disagree with the placement of the child. If parents do not agree with the IEP and placement, they may discuss their concerns with other members of the IEP team and try to work out an agreement. There are several options, including additional testing, an independent evaluation, or asking for mediation or a due process hearing. They may also file a complaint with the state education agency. Now, the final step in special education is that the child is reevaluated. At least every 3 years, the child must be reevaluated. Its purpose is to find out if the child continues to be a child with a disability, as defined by IDEA, and what the child's educational needs are. However, the child must be reevaluated more often if conditions warrant or if the child's parent or teacher asks for a new evaluation. Now, as a South Dakota parent, you are entitled to rights with your child being evaluated for special education. Your school district cannot conduct an initial evaluation of your child to determine whether your child is eligible under Part B of the IDEA to receive special education and related services without first providing you with your prior written notice of the proposed action and without obtaining your consent as described in the document. Now what this means is that the school must get your consent to do an initial evaluation of your child to see if your child is eligible to receive services. Your consent for the evaluation does not mean you have given consent for your child to receive special education services. To further your knowledge of special education, I've put together a video that explains the history of special education and how it came to the point that it is today. Prior to legislation requiring public education for children with cognitive or emotional disabilities, deafness, blindness, or the need for speech therapy, parents had few options other than to educate their children at home or pay for expensive private education. The story of special education begins in the early part of the 20th century. Parents formed advocacy groups to help bring the educational needs of children with disabilities to the public eye. These groups gained momentum mid-century, and then in 1961, President John F. Kennedy created the President's Panel on Mental Retardation. The panel's recommendations included federal aid to states. In 1965, Lyndon B. Johnson signed the Elementary and Secondary Education Act, which provided funding for primary education and is seen by advocacy groups as expanding access to public education for children with disabilities. Despite these two important events, by the 1970s only a relatively small number of children with disabilities were being educated in public schools. Both enacted in 1975, two federal laws would change this: the Education for All Handicapped Children Act, EHA, and the Individuals with Disabilities Act, IDEA. The EHA establishes a right to public education for all children regardless of disability, while the IDEA requires schools to provide individualized or special education for children with qualifying disabilities. Under the IDEA, states who accept public funds for education must provide special education to qualifying children with disabilities. The IDEA sets forth specific guidelines regarding free appropriate public education. Among these is the idea that education must be tailored to meet the needs of the individual child with a disability. This education must be of benefit to the child and should prepare the child for further education, for example college, or to live and work independently. The idea also requires that education occur in the least restrictive environment and requires schools to take a child's disability into account when enforcing discipline. Although not all children with disabilities are covered by the IDEA and EHA, these two acts have been instrumental in ensuring a free public education to millions of children with disabilities each year since passage. Prior to these acts, parents of children with disabilities had few choices as to the education of their children. Today, these children receive their education alongside children who have no disabilities.